Welcome to Melt University's 2020 summer program. This year, our virtual intern program will help you build your brand, inform you on a variety of career paths, and introduce you to top executives in sports and marketing. Here's your host, President and CEO of Melt, one of the largest independent sports and event marketing agencies in the country, Vince Thompson.
Welcome back, students, listeners, participants. Summer 2020 Melt University, Virtual Melt University rolls on. We've had some tremendous podcasts, tremendous guests, tremendous insight, tremendous advice. And today is going to be no different. I'm delighted that Commissioner of the Southeastern Conference, Greg Sankey, who's in his 17th year with the SEC. Wow, I can't believe it's been that long. Is joining us today. As you probably know, he's a little busy right now, but a tremendous story, and it's quite an honor that he's joining us today. I've been around Greg Sankey many times, and servant leader comes to my mind with this gentleman. I mean, probably nobody personifies that. And my admiration for him, started his career at State University of New York with a degree in education, master's from Syracuse. And I didn't even realize this, but amazingly has climbed just an amazing collegiate career ladder, beginning with intramural sports at Utica College, men's golf coach. I didn't realize that. Commissioner Southeastern Conference, I knew that. I knew him very well when he was COO and Chief Compliance Officer of the SEC. But there is probably nobody in the world better qualified to talk to you guys about leadership, navigating obstacles and falling off the saddle. Obviously, he's doing it in real time, and various careers and opportunities within college athletics as they're emerging. So, Commissioner Sankey, thank you so much for joining Melt University today. It's quite an honor, sir.
Well, thanks, Vince. It's an honor to me to have people who may be interested in what I have to share. So I hope it's helpful.
Well, I'm certainly they're going to learn a lot, but we kind of like to sort of start from the beginning because, you know, you and I were once college students and we were once looking for opportunities. But as you began your entry at State University of New York, did you have a particular passion for athletics or education, or how did you start this incredible climb?
I'm one of those who squeezed 4 years of college into 5 and spent time on 3 different campuses. I started out in East Texas, actually, at Laterno College. I was studying electrical engineering and playing college baseball, and I had an engineering lab every Friday at 4 p.m., and I'm not sure who does that to an 18-year-old. But what I learned in those couple of years is I didn't want to spend my life living for the weekend, and that became kind of a focus kind of to get through. And education really became the interest for me, not sports per se. And I pivoted and started an education, or continued my higher ed by pursuing an education degree. And that's what led me, really, when I finished, I thought I'd end up at a high school as a teacher and a coach, and I ended up at a college in Utica, New York, which was about an hour and a half from where I grew up. But the hook for me was they provided remitted tuition for me to attend Syracuse to pursue my master's. And one of the pieces of advice given to me early on that I've repeated is the sooner you can pursue that graduate degree, the better you are as far as having an asset on your resume. And that's what I did, and jumped from there to Northwestern State of Louisiana. Actually, this month in 1989, so now 21 years ago, moved with no air conditioning in my car. My wife and I have been married 8 months on the great adventure to live in a place called Natchitoches, Louisiana.
Wow. Yeah, that would be adventure would be the understatement probably of the day. But go back, because you say a couple of things, and we're hearing this from a lot of our speakers, is that they went to college with an idea to pursue one profession, one career, one educational path, and not necessarily did they figure out what they wanted to do at the time, but they figured out what they didn't want to do. And it's okay to sort of make that first pivot as you're going through college and identifying yourself and the independence. It's not really uncommon or a red flag, would you say?
I absolutely agree, and I think you have to have the confidence to figure out how to learn and to grow. That's part of my mantra. And for instance, my oldest daughter had two college graduate parents, which I didn't have. Neither of my parents had gone to college, so I had to figure it out a
Mm-hmm.
little bit on my own. Well, my oldest daughter had that, and she went through three majors in her freshman year. And we got to a point where I said, go use a resource on campus, the Career Center. And she found a
Mm-hmm.
meteorological degree, and now she's on TV doing weather, loves it in the sciences. And we all have to find our way, which is part of the college experience. If you think
Mm-hmm.
you figured it out at 18, you'll find out by 21 you didn't. And then for me, I continued to really keep my options open and started to realize what I didn't want to do, but focused on the opportunities in front of me that could open doors on a continuing basis.
So you mentioned one of your first great adventures, 1989. You've been married 8 months. Pack up your car. I've spent growing up in Alabama. I've spent quite a bit of time in all of those areas in Louisiana, and I can tell you it is quite an interesting adventure. But there are a couple things that stuck out to me on that. You were willing to take that risk. You were willing to take that chance. You were willing to sort of make yourself uncomfortable. I think is we've interviewed several athletic directors. Ross Bjork is like pushing yourself out of that comfort zone, and you were willing to sort of start that climb because that was the opportunity. And what we're telling our students a lot today is you don't start out as the CEO. You don't start out as commissioner of the SEC, Greg Sankey. You got to start somewhere, and you got to start this climb and paying these dues. And I want you to elaborate on that a little bit, please, sir.
No, that's the absolutely correct insight. And when I speak to volunteers who are students at our big events, I say, look, you see me now, but you don't see me then when I made $15,000 a year or when I made $500 a month as an intern and didn't have medical
Mm-hmm.
insurance, when I had to leave a job for about a 30% pay cut. And each of those was a leap of faith, taking a chance, and it's guided. Like you're going to have to decide how to make decisions. So the first job's easy. Like you don't have a job, you take a job. But I think you still have to figure out what are the elements of that role that I desire. And for me, I learned early on I was going to take a job where I'd be challenged so I could consistently learn and grow. And then when I got to the end of that learning experience, that was the time for me to go. And I think burnout and frustration is an outcome from not having a frame to make a decision about your career. You throw your hands up and say, well, it's not good for me here. But it goes back to the beginning for me where I was going to look at a job and an opportunity. Would it challenge me so that I could learn and grow? And when I got to the end of the growth cycle early on, then it was time to look for something different rather than sit there and be frustrated that I didn't get to do this or do that or have that job title. And so that meant some movement. It meant that I met a lot of people. I tell people I've never networked a day in my life, but I have built relationships at every stop along the way, and I still have those relationships. And you take advantage of the learning opportunity. And for me, start graduate school early, get outside your geographic boundaries. I knew from you go to Syracuse, New York, and draw a circle about 100 miles around it, and that was my horizon. But to move to Louisiana was a complete outlier for me. And
Mm-hmm.
then when I moved to the Southland Conference, moved up there, and even when I moved to the SEC, people would say, "Oh, I've always dreamed of working there." Well, that wasn't mine. I had kind of broader horizons of options. And I took a pretty substantial pay cut to move from being a
Mm-hmm.
commissioner to being an associate commissioner. And those are the decisions you're going to have to make. You're going to have to take chances or risks or a leap of faith, is the way I like to describe it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and to your point, like you go from and not necessarily a lateral move or step back, but every step you take is going to require taking risks, pushing yourself out of that comfort zone, the fear of the unknown, the fear of the uncertainty. but I want you to communicate to our students and our listeners that's actually healthy and okay, is it not?
Oh, absolutely. And it'll be hard. So I'll give you an example. I'm commissioner of the Southland Conference. I was in my early 30s. I led a group of 10 staff. I was in charge of a Division I conference. It was then called 1AA football. I got involved in some leadership opportunities nationally. And then one day it pops for me to come here. And I struggled for 30 days for a lot of reasons. I lived in Dallas at the time. I loved where I lived, great friends. I loved leading the way I did. But the first year and a half, 2 years here were incredibly hard because I had to readjust my expectations. I had to acclimate to a role that was not at the end of the hallway. I was dealing with different issues,
Right.
more prominent issues, more pressure. And whether it was my first job where I had to do that, my second job where I went through that, the third opportunity, that's going to be a consistent part. And that's where that mantra of be challenged so you can learn and grow informs what's happened with me. That's how I progressed.
Yeah, and like I said, you don't think of the perch that you occupy now of you going out of your comfort zone and you being uncomfortable and you going through an adjustment. And this is what we tell, I see a lot of, young kids and employees. You see a lot of young kids and employees, and, they want that instant gratification 6 months into the job. They want to be the CEO, and they see, some unicorns like a Mark Zuckerberg, but they don't see the grind that you've been through, the grind that I've been through. And it's okay to be in that grind. It's part of growing up. We tell them that change is inevitable, growth is optional. But you talk about relationships, and we talk a lot about the value of relationships, and these kids have the opportunity to build these relationships and the value of maintaining and nurturing those. Talk about your philosophy on the value of maintaining and nurturing these relationships, because there's no finite beginning and end to a relationship. It's a constant nurturing cycle, is it not?
It is, and it may be every week, it may be twice a year, it may be once a year. But if you build a relationship, that is an asset that you create for two people. The ability to call someone and say, "Hey, what do you think?" Or "I'm dealing with a hard issue." I had one of those calls this morning, and especially at this time of uncertainty, you rely on those relationships in an even greater way. But for me, it was not that I just wanted to meet someone, introduce myself. It was I wanted to have an opportunity to get to know them. So if we were in a room and I was with those listening, and that I'd give them an opportunity to ask questions, but I would ask them to tell me something about themselves. The first thing you find out, it makes them uncomfortable and then makes them and everybody else relax. But it's an example of I'm trying to go beyond just you're the commissioner of the Southeastern Conference, or you're the head of your own firm, or you're this or that, to the person. And for me, Mike's Live is simply a great example where he and I were sitting talking at a reception at an NCAA meeting in Kansas City when the NCAA headquarters were there. And he said, "Tell me your story." And I told him my story, and I got my first job at Utica College. And he says, "That's where I was born and raised." And then 4 or 5 years, there's actually 2 or 3 years after that, he had told me, "Hey, there's this restaurant we'd go to all the time. If you're ever back, you ought to go have lunch there." And so I went. It was called Pelletieri Joe's. And he said, "You won't want to go in, but it's the best Italian food you'll ever have." And I did that on the way to a meeting where Mike and Liz were attending. And I said, "Hey, we went to Pelletieri Joe's." And I've jokingly, I'd said it to him when he was alive. That was the most significant decision of my career because I cared enough to turn off the highway, to take 2 hours because I had a relationship and go have a shared experience where I could then have a conversation. And he tried to hire me a year later at Conference USA. I didn't take that opportunity. We kept the relationship, and I called him one day about something completely unrelated. And that's when he talked to me about moving here to work for him when he had just started. It was his first month as commissioner back in '02.
Wow, I never knew that story, and that's an amazing story. So to our students and our listeners, I'm positive that you know who Commissioner Mike Slive is and was. Rest his soul, amazing human being. But there's if you study Greg Sankey, and there's another person you study Commissioner Sly, because to your point, Commissioner, he was one of the greatest relationship builders and maintainers. He was one of the greatest listeners. And then he was always very curious, and we're telling our students to be curious. And so the fact that he says, "Hey, tell me about yourself," and the percentages that, you guys grew up in the same place where you went to college and all that, really led to a series of amazing, fortunate circumstances. And so I think that's a tremendous story. And that's a great segue into we're talking to our students about the importance of developing mentors. And I would speculate or guess that Mike Slide was a mentor to you. You may have been a mentor to him. I'm confident of that as well. But I'm sure you still have a lot of mentors that you rely on, particularly through all the madness and things that are going on. But talk to our students about when they get, if and when they get back to college, or even now, the importance of seeking mentors out.
Well, for me, it was part of my evaluation when I moved to Louisiana. Um, when I worked at Utica College, the AD gave me the best piece of advice, but it was the only one I really got in 2 years, which was, if you don't start your graduate degree now, you never will. And that created opportunity. And then I had seen his good and bad, and I made a list, and I said, the next opportunity I take is you're not going to have these characteristics. And I went down, I visited with the AD at Northwestern State, a guy named Tynes Hildebrand, and he did everything that I decided I didn't want him to do, but I took the job anyway. And we're now 30 years into a friendship. He's in his early 80s. And I've stayed up with him. In fact, he ended up working with me. Mike, I chaired a committee on which he served, and we were colleagues really first before I worked for him. And what I'd say is, Mike, when I took the job, I said, Mike, the goal is we were friends before I came here, and we're going to be friends when I'm done or when you're done. And it was, he retired before I did, and we kept that objective. A guy named Britton Banowski, who led Conference USA for a number of years now, works for the college football playoff. And I'll be honest, I got to know Roy Kramer because I was that 30-something commissioner, and Roy Kramer sat in the office I now occupy. And one day I picked up the phone. I was kind of scared to death because I'm like, he won't want to talk to me. And Roy is someone I still call and talk with. And he was the sixth commissioner of the Southeastern Conference. Mike was number 7, and I'm now number 8. And I actually feel a responsibility to provide that kind of conversation, development, interaction for those who would benefit.
And like I said, you research Roy Kramer. Mr. Kramer is amazing. Dr. Harvey Schiller, Commissioner Slive, and the chair you fill. I mean, it's that office. I'm sure you walk in that office every day, and you sort of still feel their presence and that influence. But to your point, I mean, that burden and that responsibility. But we encourage our kids. The thing we talk to our kids about is that you don't necessarily want a mentor to be a personal cheerleader. You want to hear those tough words. You want to hear that tough love. You want to hear that constructive criticism, and talk about that, because like I said, you mentor a lot of people. You got a lot of great people around you, Charlie Hussey and dear friends like that. But talk about the qualities of a mentor as well.
Mike was on a committee I chaired with the NCA, and we were close. And one day I picked up the phone, and he just ripped me about something. He was commissioner of conference, right? And really, for the next 15 years, probably never had an angry moment together as we worked with each other. But he was honest with me. And Tynes Hildebrand, I was working for him as director of compliance. I was a golf coach, and I told him I was going to pursue another opportunity. He said, I don't think you should do that. And I ignored him, and it was the absolutely right decision. So, the mentoring is, you're going to have to make a decision for yourself. You're going to have to take ownership. But what you want is a really wise group of people who can help guide you through decision making, who can encourage you when the moments are low, who can bring you back a little bit when you're a little bit too big for your britches. You can help you think through problems. I called Roy 2 weeks into this this shutdown back in March. And I said, what do you think I need to be doing? He said, I have no idea. He said, 9/11, and we had to shut down for about a week and a half. He said, I never went through this. And you know what? That's mentoring. That's honesty to say, you're not on your own. You can call me whenever you want to, and I'm happy to listen, but I don't have a magic box with answers in it either. And it helps itself.
Well, and we have had so far we've interviewed Alan Green, Greg McGarity, and Ross Bjork, three of your athletic directors within the SEC, and obviously from all stages of the careers and advice. But one thing, Commissioner, that we have discovered and learned, and I have even discovered and learned, is that there are now so many new and emerging careers within the business of college sports, within the business of college athletics, from the perch you occupy. We've learned about there are mental health careers and positions within athletic departments now. There are obviously compliance is going to be another huge issue with the advent of name, image, and likeness. And you're a big advocate for student athletes because you were one, Ross was one, Alan was one, Greg was one. So y'all speak the same language. Data analytics and data mining, obviously getting people back into the stands, making that investment, the evolution of the kids and their use of the image and likeness. But from where you sit and the people you talk to, within even these positions we've mentioned, but other places, obviously fan safety and fan experience is tantamount now. Where do you see other new and emerging opportunities that might be non-traditional for kids who are seeking careers in college athletics?
Yeah, great question. I was at the first wave of the new compliance activity. After SMU's death penalty, people reacted by adding staff, and those have just expanded the regulatory issues. And I think you touch on one, which despite what can be read about institutional role in name, image, and likeness, our young people are asking for help. Just with the looking down the road, they're going to need help. And I'm not talking about representing them for sales. I'm talking about how do I manage my life? The mental wellness piece you hit on. Our universities have gone from zero, probably 5 years ago, to 6 or 7 people dedicated to the mental wellness support. Anybody that can make it rain is always going to have an opportunity. And by that, I think, Vince, you know what I mean. Somebody that can go sell and present themselves and bring in business activity and think creatively, they're going to have opportunities and development. But I'll just tell you that for me, the compliance world allowed me to be connected to every position on campus. And it is a hard job where you don't always have friends. But the mistake people make is, well, I'm just doing compliance. No, what I knew is the president cared about what I did, the provost, the registrar, the financial aid director, the faculty, the financial controller for the university, and then everybody through the athletic department, every coach, every staff member. And when I talk to folks, and particularly in the compliance industry, it's hard. It's probably harder now, and it's hard on my campuses. But people have successful careers. And the asset you create is you have to look at a problem campus wide. And you have to have relationships that go well beyond just a coach or just an athletic department. And you create value for yourself in a way that I think people miss in that role. And I'm trying to sell that career, but I do think that's something when you're in development and you can make it rain by raising money or selling tickets. You also better know what's happening on the regulatory side of an athletics department. I have friends who I've watched walk into these key leadership roles who are great at selling tickets or raising money, and then they just get blindsided by the regulatory, the student athlete support expectations, and those are real and have to be central in your long-term career development.
Well, you the way you just laid out the career opportunities and compliance. I mean, nobody's really explained it to us quite like that. So, what type of classwork or background? Because you don't have to have a law degree, you don't have to have a legal degree, but what should our kids? So if a kid is studying something, then they go to Auburn and the athletic department say, "Hey, I want to work within the compliance department." What career path should they begin starting themselves on in their studies, in your opinion?
Well, I think communications is actually an asset.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge to communicate has to be a priority. I think that's an open-ended question because as an undergraduate, you're trying to keep your options open. You're trying to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Then where do you
Mm-hmm.
invest yourself? My very first job, I was an intramural director. I bought my own NCA manual and actually read the thing back in 1987, 88, which doesn't make any
Wow.
sense. But you got to find out where your curiosity and interest lies. Get a broad education as an undergrad, and then go specify off of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we hear the term curiosity a lot out of that. But um, so if you like I said, in the perch you're in, and the perch your leadership's in, and the community, and the level of relationships that you have, so many people, whether they're student athletes or not student athletes, want to go to work for the SEC. They want to go to work for the networks. They want to go to work for the athletic departments. But we are trying to groom and help our kids understand what gets Commissioner Greg Sankey's attention if there is an entry level or somebody that wants to apply for a job within the SEC. What are the things that get your attention? Because we tell our kids, "Hey, it's like a blind date. It's like a this ongoing communication process is like an audition." But give us some tips of the trade, or secrets that get your attention at the level you're on from somebody that's seeking a career.
Yeah. So the first question I'm going to look. So if I get 100 resumes, I'm going to ask, have you invested in yourself, which is education based for me. Have you
Mhm.
pursued a graduate degree? The second is experience. So have you shown interest in pursuing this, or is this just your curiosity that I want to work in sports? And given my level, I don't have a whole lot of entry level opportunities. The experience is really
Mm-hmm.
important.
Right.
The third piece is you're going to have to leave geographical boundaries. You may have to go work for the Big Sky Conference and then end up working where you want to. For me, I ended up in Natchitoches, Louisiana. So take the geographic constraints off, go find an opportunity, and then when you're in that opportunity, never say no to something that's presented to you. I walk out of an office. I'm a golf coach, and I didn't have experience at that, and I ended up winning an award for that. And then when I see your information, I assume your cover letter is your best work. That means it's well written and well presented, it's personalized. If there's a typo, you may be one of the best people ever, but that's a filter. And if you can't invest
Right.
yourself,
Right.
cover letter, and then your resume needs to be constructed in a way that features you. That is a sales document, not over the top, but very sophisticated. I don't care if it's 1 pages or 2 pages. If you've been at it a while and it's 4 pages, but is it consistent? Is it clear? Is it correct? And then you'll get the opportunity for a conversation if you've prepared in that way. But I think people undervalue the effort to build their cover letter. I have probably removed more people from a poorly written cover letter than any single issue.
Yeah. Yeah. And I tell you, the other pet peeve that I try to tell our students is that I'll get we have a generic email address, and it'll say, to whom it may concern, here's my resume, and I need to make X dollars. And I immediately flush them because they're already showing me what type of employee they will be. It's only as important as you make it. And you've just really, really highlighted all those things, even down to if there's a typo in the cover letter and you didn't take enough time to really proof it or have some other fresh eyes on it. But, and then, and students, I hope you're listening to this, but Commissioner, I've always admired you for what I call, sort of being a servant leader. You kind of you walk the walk, talk the talk, but talk about sort of what that means and how that philosophy can permeate down to our students who are just beginning their career path. Because, like I said, I have a high regard for you and what I call that, but I just always admired the way and the style of which you approach things.
Yeah, well, I was a student teacher back in my college days. I didn't have to, but there was a closet that was a mess, and we didn't have a team practice on a Friday, and so I spent my extra 3 hours organizing the closet. Now that's a small thing. Nobody asked me. Nobody told me. It's just that was a problem that I could figure out how to solve. Um, I ask my staff to look around when we're at championships and figure out how they can solve problems. It may not be their area, but if you have to wait for somebody else to solve a problem, then you're not going to get much done as a group if it's everybody else's responsibility. And I just think it's an ownership and care. When I interviewed for this job, I had to go through a psychological profile, and there were like 40 points and a whole bunch of people that have done this at major league levels. And of the 40 points, it's like red light, yellow light, green light. Green light was you meet the expectation for a CEO. And I had 39 green lights and one red light. And the red light was I was too humble. That's what the psychological profile.
Wow.
It sounded like I bragged
Wow.
about that. And I actually visit with a psychologist who analyzes it for the search firm, and I hung up the phone. I said, well, if that's why I don't get the job, that's okay. And so
Right.
that's something that's cultivated over time. Now I'm going to have an ego too, but that's about listening.
Yeah, you're right about that. I think listening is a big one. But so as we close out this fascinating interview, do you have any recommendations for go-to resources of your own, which would be podcasts, books, resources, websites, or anything that forms and influences your opinion? We've heard from Sports Business Journal, we were Front Office Sports, Sports Techie, and those guys. But tell us, outside the realm or outside the norm, some of your go-tos.
A long time ago, I passed out in the bathroom of the Atlanta airport and spent a night in the hospital because I wasn't taking care of myself. I was 32 years old and went to the Fulton County Medical Center with an irregular heartbeat. And in the 6 months after, I was trying to figure out how to balance my life, and I bumped into a book called The Life You've Always Wanted, and the author is John Ortberg. And I just walked by and I'm like, well, if I'm waking up off the bathroom floor, I'm not in a good place in my life. And so the title attracted me. And that book has meant a lot to me now 20 something years later. I was actually coming to a meeting at the Southeastern Conference when I had that episode, and I didn't make it here. And so I had to adjust myself. So that's a book that's really, really valuable. There's a book by a guy named Andy Hill called Be Quick But Don't Hurry. And it's about him playing for John Wooden as a basketball student athlete at UCLA. And what he learned is everything that Coach Wooden taught him, he used every day in his life in his 40s. And he didn't like John Wooden, but it was a point of reconciliation and a point of learning. And I think that's a really, really valuable asset. And from a website, from a podcast, John Gordon produces a podcast called Positive You that I found of great value, and a guy named David Axelrod, which goes really long, just to think a little bit outside my own sports zone with both.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we've heard the mention of John Wooden multiple times in some of these great podcasts, and we encourage our students because not only the Wizard of Westwood, one of the great basketball coaches, the greatest basketball coach of all time, but as a life coach and a lifeguard, and there's nobody better. So we encourage our students to research Coach John Wooden. But Commissioner Sankey, we know you're busy. You got a lot moving on in real time. We tell our kids that used to run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now it's 24 minutes and 7 seconds. So you're slaying the dragons in real time, but so we just appreciate your time, Commissioner Greg Sankey of the Southeastern Conference. I think you guys can hear that humility in his voice. Just one of the real gems. I want you to listen to this, listen over and over again. But we really appreciate you sharing your time and wisdom with the students of Melt University. So thank you so much, Commissioner, for your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Melt University 2020, virtual summer 2020. We roll on. Commissioner Sankey, thank you so much.
Thanks, Vince. Hope you enjoyed today's virtual class. We'll be back soon with another edition of Melt University 2020.